All right, as I said, Proverbs. As the question came up earlier about dating, you know, when I was in school, fixing the date for the production of a book from the Bible really took a lot of people's time. They worried about that. And I don't really know why it matters much. And frankly, it doesn't matter much because the more you dig into it, it's really hard to label it, to nail it down. In the New Testament, it helps because we can, you know, Paul says he's in Corinth at this time, and then we have the Acts of the Apostles to kind of, you know, so we can fix and for some real dates. But everything in the Old Testament is kind of conjectured. So, you know, claiming that Solomon was the author of Proverbs, like the opening does, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, would suggest it's 10th century. But as I said earlier, it's a collection of collections. And in my own hand scratching here, I wrote down, here are the various collections. I have a little pointer. And one of them even says, the second says, Proverbs of Solomon that were put together by the men of Hezekiah. Hezekiah the king was, you may remember that name, I hope you do. He was a contemporary to Isaiah, so end of the 700s, 700. So, you know, we have sayings of Agur. We have words of Lemuel taught to him by his mother. So the book, as it comes to us, isn't one person did not sit down and write it. It's a gathering of various words. It's thought that the Proverbs are the oldest section, and then the beginning and the end were added later. And that goes with that old idea I've spoken to you about before. Think of when you're building a snowman, and you start with a small, you know, and then you roll it in the dirt, in the ground. And the newest additions are at the beginning. If you slice through the snowman piece, the newest pieces are the beginning and the end. Because that's where you can add stuff. It's easy to add stuff to a manuscript at the beginning and the end. You did not, less often, did you add stuff in the middle. So, similarly, the Proverbs, the sayings, the Proverbs of Solomon, sayings of the wise, these are probably the oldest, and then it has an oral beginning, an oral tradition that was originally written down, and then these other pieces were added to. So again, the attribution to Solomon, I would suggest, is honorific, because he's seen as the patron of wisdom, like Moses is the patron of law. Even law that was written later is attributed to Moses. And David, all the Psalms. And you learned in our study of Psalms last year that many of the Psalms bear other people's names. The book of Proverbs is primarily of two types. It's two-line sayings, and it's admonition. And admonition is a little speech. So in my hand scratching, I got two-liners, admonitions, 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 admonitions. Numerical sayings are numerical sayings. So the works or the sections are divided into different little kinds of writing. In the Hebrew Bible, the books are named by their first word. And in Hebrew, the word is Mishle Shalomah. Shalomah is Solomon. Mishle is the plural of the word mashal, M-A-S-H-A-L, which means saying or poem or song. The word mashal is used a lot in the Old Testament. It means, its root is to, like the word parable. Parable is like parallel. You're comparing two things. The kingdom of heaven is like. See, you're comparing this to that. So mashal has the sense of you're comparing one thing to another. And that's going to be the mark of a proverb. The wise man does this, but the fool does that. Okay, so we're comparing and contrasting. So we'll go through this. The first lecture is all about the opening section, chapter 1 through chapter 9. It's written as an introduction to the book. Let's do look now. I found, here's where I have my list of different kinds of parallelism. Look at chapter 10 of Proverbs. The very first verse. Chapter 10, verse 1. Okay. A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a sorrow to his mother. So what kind of parallelism is that? Antithetical. Because it contrasts not just father and mother, but it contrasts the wise son versus the foolish son. You see that? Okay, so 10:1 is an example of antithetical parallelism. Look at 22, verse 1.
What? Chapter 22?
Yes. Proverbs 22, verse 1. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. Favor is better than silver or gold. So the two thoughts are parallel. They're using different images, but they're saying the same thing. For an example of a synthetic or progressive parallel proverb, look at chapter 4. Verse 18. The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. See, the second line extends and deepens the first line. Okay. So again, just now that you recognize it, you can forget it. I just want to show you that the book of Proverbs reflects that characteristic of all Hebrew poetry, not rhyming, but it has parallel thoughts. Sometimes antithetical, sometimes synonymous, sometimes synthetic.
And 18 is which?
You tell me.
Well, I can't get it in my head, that's why I asked.
Synthetic. Synthetic. Again, Proverbs do not usually command, they try to persuade. Huh? They do not dictate how things must be, they describe how things work. You are free to do it this way or not, but if you don't do it this way, you are a fool. So their purpose is not to indoctrinate, but to educate. But one thing that's not in Proverbs is the expectation of life beyond this life. So that's why it's important to learn how to be wise, because the only way to get rewarded is now, to be successful. Okay? That's why it is as it is. Okay? So let's just plunge in here. Because we have, up till lunch, we'll be reading from chapters 1 through 9. It is the opening admonitions. It starts out, chapter 1, verses 2 through 6, is an explanation of the book. What is this? What's the program of the book? What is its purpose? It says, so what's the purpose? That men may know wisdom and instruction, understanding words of insight, receive instruction in wise dealing, righteousness, justice, and equity, that prudence may be given to the simple, knowledge and direction to the youth, that wise men also may hear and increase in learning, and the man of understanding acquire skill, to understand a proverb and a figure, and words of the wise and their riddles. So you might say it's a very long title. It's trying to describe what the book is aiming to do. Okay? And you see it overlaps with prophetic images, concerns about justice and righteousness and equity. But all of that so that the wise man may hear and increase in learning. And then with verse 7, we have that, for the first time, a verse you're going to hear many times in our travels through the wisdom literature. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Let me address fear of the Lord again. I know we talked about this at least once, because it's always part of my lecture when we read Exodus and Moses brings the Israelites, the Hebrew slaves, to the foot of Mount Sinai, and God starts speaking to them. And what they hear is thunder and the earth quaking and smoke, and they're afraid, and they cry out to Moses, "You speak to God, because God's voice hurts our ears." And Moses says, "Don't be afraid. Have fear of the Lord." Now it's like, what? Well, the point is, the fact that those two terms appear in one verse are a clear statement that when we say fear of the Lord, we don't mean I'm scared of you. Moses says, don't be scared. Have fear of the Lord. When we talked about this 3 years ago, I talked about there's a construction in Hebrew called construct. When you link words, in English, we talk about compound words. Pine, apple. Neither pine nor is apple. It's something else. Pineapple. Well, construct is when you take two Hebrew words and bind them together with a bar. We would call it a hyphen, but it's the top. That's called construct. Fear of the Lord is a construct. It's like pine and apple. So the word fear doesn't mean fear anymore, like it means just all by itself. Fear of the Lord is piety. It's showing God his due, proper respect and awe. So it's not fear. Again, children are given these phrases and they think, okay, I'm supposed to be afraid of God. No. You're supposed to show God proper respect and awe. So fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now that's a religious point that you don't find in other traditions, but it's typical of Judaism. All right. The book of the first 9 chapters or 10 chapters are made up of a series of instructions, father or mother speaking to a child, and it always starts at "my son." That's how you know. Okay, so there are 10 of them. Every time you hear "my son," it's a separate little paragraph, a separate little theme. And then in between, there are interludes, just little admonitions on other similar or not so similar themes. Okay? So pay attention to "my son." When it begins a sentence, that's a division. That's one of the instructions. There are 10 of these instructions. Again, you would put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in the column. That's what we would do. But in the ancients, they would always start with the same word. That's how they would signal. Okay, new paragraph. They didn't have indentation. They couldn't return their typewriter. Okay, but they would signal it by coming back to that same phrase. So verse 8 is the beginning of the first instruction, and it's a warning to men, to boys, not to hang out with games. Verse 8, "Hear, my son, your father's instructions, and reject not your mother's teaching, for they are a fair garland for your head and pendants for your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us wantonly ambush the innocent, like Sheol, let us swallow them alive.'" Now, that may sound very, but again, who is the book addressed to? Probably young men, adolescents, I mean, people in a school. It's not, women are mentioned a lot. Well, let's talk about this Hokmah business. Why is wisdom feminine? Well, lots of guesses. Maybe because mama teaches it. You know, what does mama always say? But it's also, it could be a literary device. You know, marriage is a really huge deal. It's especially a big deal in the Old Testament, Judaism. Rabbis were expected to marry. It's very important. And if you're teaching a class, I'm teaching physics, or I'm teaching, you know, something that you're really bored at, how could I make you intrigued? Well, if I tell you that this has a feminine nature to it, that it's like hunting for a wife, learning this information. So it's a male teacher, likely speaking to young men, and so maybe the tradition is to pitch it because this is as important as finding a good wife. Now, the book's going to end with a poem about a really good wife. So scholars, you know, try to say, why is it that wisdom is associated with the feminine in ancient cultures? And again, either of these arguments, we're never going to solve it, I suspect. Is it because mama always used to teach it? Or because it's men who are formally instructed in court, and the idea of its importance is likened to seeking a good woman? Okay. So, but this the first instruction is warning the young men not to run in gangs, not to join people who invite them to be like Sheol, who devoured other people. Huh? That's a little interesting and unusual. Look at verse 19, the close of it. Such are the ways of all who get gain by violence. It takes away the life of its possessors. So the admonition is, don't join a gang. In the end, it will consume you. Jesus would say, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Okay? So it's a bit of, that's a wisdom line too. There's an example of the first instruction. A parent's speech against gangs. Chapter 1, verse 20 to 33 is an interlude. Notice it doesn't start out, my son, does it? It starts out, wisdom cries aloud in the street. Now, wisdom is a woman, okay? So this is the first speech of woman wisdom. Capital W, capital W. Okay? It's a personification. Wisdom is personified as a woman. Except she's not being where women normally would be. Where would women in this culture be? In the home. Grinding grain. I mean, they wouldn't be in public. This is a very public woman. But again, because again, it's not a real woman. It's female. It's wisdom. It's wisdom personified as a woman. Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the markets, she raises her voice. On the top of the walls, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gates, she speaks. Now, you'll always see men at the city gates. Remember, I talked about that. That's where justice took place. If you had an argument with somebody, you'd go to the city gate, and you'd get 8 or 9 old codgers who had nothing better to do than to sit on their rocking chairs and watch people come and go, and you'd tell your fight to the men. And so the men would decide. So the judging is done in the gates. That's not a space for women in this culture. Okay? Women are inside, men are outside. But again, this woman is outside because she's woman wisdom. And where do they need her most? Where the men are deciding who's right and who's wrong. Huh? That's where it's really needed. She speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? Give heed to my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my thoughts to you. I will make my words known to you, because I have called and you refuse to listen, have stretched out my hand and no one has heeded, and you have ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof. So woman wisdom is a kind of scolding here as the young men don't really pay attention. She's there to tell them what will lead them to life and success. Look at verse 32. The simple are killed by their turning away from me, from her. And the complacence of fools destroys them. But he who listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of evil. We're going to hear Lady Wisdom speak again like this, inviting people to come to her house. Because if you come to her house, she will feed you. And the stuff she feeds you will give you life. Again, she's not feeding you hamburgers and hot dogs. She's feeding you the proper way to understand how the world works. Okay? And if you don't do that, you are a fool. Now, there's going to be another woman in this story. So we're going to call her, I usually call her Lady, one of my teachers would call her Lady Wisdom, but she's also called Wisdom. And the alternative number is Dame Fool. Dame Fool. Okay? So, Lady Wisdom versus Dame Fool. Must have been Brits who came up with that language, because we don't say dame like they do, but okay. So, chapter 2 is the sage's second instruction. Again, look how it starts. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding, yes, if you cry out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. So notice, they're not teaching us wisdom yet. I mean, this, the first instruction, stay away from gangs, that was a proverb, that was instruction. They're saying now, just seek wisdom, seek wisdom. They don't give you the wisdom right now, they're just saying seek it, seek wisdom. The topic is here, is it praise of wisdom? Look at verse 9. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity and every good path. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Verse 12. Delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech, who forsake the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil. You will be saved from the loose woman. Now, in my I don't know what, does yours say loose or foreign? Strange. Okay, the term can mean all of those things. Loose, strange, foreign. Remember we asked the question about Solomon earlier. And I said, he had all these wives who worshiped other gods. He was marrying loose, strange, foreign women. So again, for the Hebrew, alien women are dangerous. Remember again, the teacher is teaching young men. And what's he telling them? Find a wife, kind of subliminally, find a wife among your own people. Because other cultures have other rules than we have. Again, it was like your parents wanted you to marry a Catholic. Okay? Because other traditions have different ways of living. And so we encourage that you don't marry a strange woman. So anyway, this strange woman kind of transitions into Dame Fool. Okay? You'll see that as we go along. Okay? So back to verse 16. If you follow wisdom, do what wisdom says, you will be saved from the loose or strange woman, from the adventuress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. You surely, women, you surely recognize the author does not have a warm place in his heart for women. Women are dangerous. Women are dangerous. But again, think, it's a man teaching men. It's in that culture, this is a male, women, as I said earlier, convey the wisdom tradition, but this collection is a man teaching men.
There's some truth in that.
Well, of course there's truth in that. We don't need to rub your noses in it, though. That's all I'm saying. Okay? So I think that's verse 5 of chapter 3. Am I still on the right? No, have I moved on to the next? Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry. Then look at chapter 3, the very beginning. Again, my son. Okay, so that's the third. Here is the third instruction. The third time my son shows up. My son, do not forget my teaching. Again, it gets very repetitive sometimes. The theme here is the wisdom of piety. Okay, verse 5. So here's where wisdom and religion kind of overlap. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord. Turn away from evil. Verse 11. What do you see there? My son. Okay, so here's the next. Well, actually, yes, very brief. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. That's actually just a big fat proverb. That's not another instruction. It's just a big fat proverb. Mm-hmm. It's used in the book, in the letter of the Hebrews. We're going to read Hebrews at the end of the year. And Hebrews makes a couple big quotations, and this happens to be one of them. Verse 13 of chapter 3 is another poem. It's not an instruction, it's a separate interlude. Happy is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gets understanding, for the gain from it is better than gain from silver, its profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Verse 18. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who held her fast are called happy. Notice that last word echoes the first word of verse 13. So the image of, again, remember, wisdom is a she, is personified, and if you follow her, you will gain life and riches, and you will become happy. Verse 19. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. We're going to find a poem in chapter 8 where wisdom speaks about, Lady Wisdom says, I was there at creation. Remember I told you, it's like God has poured a cup of wisdom into the mix of creation. That's why it's in the world. In fact, look at the bees and how they work, and look at the birds and how they prepare a home. You can learn wisdom from the natural world because God has poured it into all things. Okay? Chapter 4. Am I right about that? No. Yes. No. Yes. Yeah, 4, that's good enough. 4, which happens to be the 5th exhortation. Look at hero sons, there it is. Hero sons of father's instruction.
Mine says old children.
Well, that's and that is translation.
Well, the rest of them are all sons, but this one's children.
Yeah, I think modern translators, because it excludes women, they tried to make it more inclusive, and actually, you wouldn't know her maybe. Diane Bergant is a religious woman, a Catholic. She's written tons of writing, and she wrote a commentary on Proverbs, and she scolds translators who I mean, in their desire to make people want to read it who aren't men, they break what it really is. It's this classroom, father and men, and she says no, it should be father and son, father and son, father and son. So anyway, hero son / children, father's instruction. Be attentive that you may gain insight, for I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said, let your heart hold fast my words. Keep my commandments and live. Do not forget. Do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Get wisdom. Do it, Go do it. Get wisdom. Get insight. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. And whatever you get insight. Prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a fair garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. Now, again, notice there really isn't any instruction in that paragraph. It's a big exhortation to be serious about learning. This is the introduction. The wisdom is coming with the Proverbs primarily. This is an introduction to the Proverbs. You want wisdom? Well, get wisdom. Learn these words and follow them. It's an exhortation. So, like, as a preacher, I can tell you the commandments, but then I've got to exhort you to keep them. This is the right thing to do. Don't be a fool. Do this. Okay, so that's what's kind of going on here. Again, it can tend to be a little redundant, but again, love wisdom and hate evil is kind of the theme of that. Let's move on to chapter 5, because here we get a little bit of blood and guts. Here we get some instructions. Now, it says something about the culture. That in this introduction, one of the main themes is how to handle your sexuality. Things have not changed. I mean, there are periods of time, during the Victorian era, when we kind of it's submerged and we didn't talk about it, but it's always been a problem. Okay? How do you handle this drive that we have, looking for a partner? And so you're going to find a lot of this. Wait till you get to Sirach. Oh my God. A lot of instruction for men about how to take care of their sexuality. Women weren't the problem. Men are the problem. Look at chapter 5. This happens to be the 8th instruction. My son, be attentive to my wisdom. Incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion and keep your lips, and your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a loose woman drip honey. Now, I should take that back. Women are blamed, but it's men who are instructed. There are women out there who are trying to trap you, so be careful. Okay? So, now, the lips of a loose woman drip honey. You know what that's all about, don't you? I mean, the honey part, not the... I mean, again, he is trying to instruct, again, in a culture where the rules were very, very strict, and he's trying to reinforce them with lovely poetry. Her speech is smoother than oil. Oh, honey. But in the end, she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps follow the path to Sheol. She does not take heed to the path of life. Remember, wisdom leads to success in life. Her ways wander. She does not know it. So, there's more here. Now, O sons, listen to me. Do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others and your years to the merciless. That is, either her being a pain or her husband, who's going to find you out, and going to suffer, and you're going to suffer. Again, remember how there's no police force. There's no. If you are unfaithful to your spouse, she doesn't have a lot of control. But if you're canoodling with another man's wife, he can kill you for that. Okay? And so who is going? When he says she is going to lead you to death, does he mean that she's leading you to waste your resources and energy? Perhaps. But also implied is that, remember, she has a husband. And her husband is going to punish. Okay? Lest strangers take their fill of your strength and your labors go to the house of an alien, buying gifts to her, like diamonds, whatever. And at the end of your life, you groan when your flesh and body are consumed. Verse 13. This is a praise of marriage. So it's got an overall theme. This whole chapter is on the same theme. Drink water from your own cistern. Does anybody need to explain that? Flowing water from your own well. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone, not for strangers. Take care of your spouse. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely hind, a graceful doe. Let her affection fill you at all times with delight. Be infatuated always with her love. Okay, so again, it's not love poetry, but he says, be careful of the strange woman, we told it earlier, and then be careful of the woman who would attract you to adulterous relationship. Love your wife. Okay? Chapter 6, verse 6 is an interlude, but here's an example of animals and creation being an example for us. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her food in summer and gathers her sustenance in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard, when you will arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a vagabond and like an armed man. First, that phrase, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. You probably heard that before, because that gets taken out as a kind of a comment about laziness. And again, think of what's the folk tale about the grasshopper and the ant? The grasshopper and the ant, he had to play his violin, and the ants were working all summer, and then winter came. So again, it's a folk. That's an American folk tale, huh? But it's on the same idea. Seeing ants constantly work. So the father says, look at the ants in the anthill. See them carrying leaves down below? See that? What's what we should be doing? Winter's coming. Okay? So the animals animals are wise. They have been created such. And so we should imitate them. Verse 16. Plopped in the middle of this is what's called a numerical proverb, which is usually, it's a series of things that are alike in some manner. Okay? Verse 16. There are 6 things which the Lord hates, 7 which are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil. Notice he's gone from the top of the body to the bottom. Started by haughty eyes, lying tongue. See, heart, he's going head, heart, feet. A false witness that breathes out lies, and a man who sows discord among brothers. All of these things are abhorrent to God. Chapter 6, verse 20, familiar theme. My son, another instruction, my son, keep your father's commandment and forsake not your mother's teaching. So again, notice, dad and mom are the sources of wisdom. Okay? Then skip down to 25. Verse 24. They preserve you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adventuress. That's the same image from the earlier chapter. Do not desire her beauty in your heart. Do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. For a harlot may be hired for a loaf of bread, but an adulteress stalks a man's very life. Now let's take that apart. First, he's acknowledging that prostitution exists. You can buy a woman for a loaf of bread, which says something about how hard it was to be a prostitute. You can buy a woman for a loaf of bread. But if you get entangled in a relationship, an affair, she is going to take more than a loaf of bread. She is going to stalk your very life. Okay? Verse 27, same theme. Can a man carry fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk upon hot coals and his feet not be scorched? So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. Go into, of course, it's an image for sexual intercourse. Go into his neighbor's wife. None who touches her will go unpunished. Now, is he saying that God's going to get you? Not necessarily. Someone is going to get you. There's going to be retribution for this. Okay? Chapter 7 is the 10th instruction, and guess what? It's more of the same. Verse 4 of chapter 7. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call insight your intimate friend, to preserve you from the loose woman, from the adventuress with her smooth words. For at the window of my house I have looked out through my lattice, and I have seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youths a young man without sense. Now, what's happening is the adulteress is being transformed into Dame Folly. That's before. Dame Folly. Okay? Because now she's going to speak for herself. Okay? Verse 10. Lo, a woman meets him, dressed as a harlot, wily of heart. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. You get a sense of what a good woman did, huh? By what Dame Folly doesn't do. She's loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. Now in the street, now in the market, at every corner she lies in wait. Now again, he's talking about loose women, but he's really talking about Dame Folly, this personification of foolishness, of which adultery is a number one concern for the teacher here. Huh? Verse 18, verse 16. This is Dame Folly speaking. I have decked my couch with coverings, colored spreads of Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love till morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. For my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took a bag of money with him. At full moon, he will come home. With much seductive speech, she persuades him. With her smooth talk, she compels him. All at once he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or a stag is caught fast. Verse 24 is the conclusion of this section. Now, O sons, listen to me. Be attentive to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many a victim has she laid low. Yea, all her slain are a mighty host. All the men that Dame Folly and the strange woman have slain is a mountain of men whom they have led astray. Verse 27, her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death. Okay, got the story? It keeps pushing. Now, we turn the page, and now Lady Wisdom speaks. Now, she is also out on the street, but she's a different woman. Huh? And she has a house. And she invites the young men to come and dine at her table. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, in the paths she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries aloud. So she's at the same place that Dame Folly has been, huh? Out in the public space. Because you can remember, it's not a real woman, it's the personification of wisdom. To you, O men, I call, my cry is to the sons of men. O simple ones, learn prudence. Foolish men, pay attention. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. Verse 12. I, wisdom, dwell in prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Verse 14. I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me princes rule, and nobles govern the earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, in the paths of justice. Okay, so wisdom now is speaking for herself. With verse 22, we enter into another world. Still Lady Wisdom speaking, but now she talks about creation. Now this passage is really important. It will be copied later by the author Sirach and the author of Job. That wisdom speaks and talks about helping God with creation. So this was a huge hit, this next thing. And it has a big impact in early Christianity, which we'll talk about after lunch. Let's just read it before they gong us. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman. And I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in these sons of men. So wisdom, which is being personified as a woman, talks about having been there at creation. I told you earlier, the Jews saw that God had sprinkled a big cup of wisdom in creation. This is why ants do what ants do. Okay? That's why early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. That's why nothing good happens ever midnight, because it's been folded in to creation. But notice, wisdom speaks as if she was God's little helper, God's consort. Other religions had male gods and female gods. Okay? Israel doesn't. Israel only has the one God, who, though genderless, is referred to usually as he. He did this and he did that. And so you see what can happen here? Here, wisdom, which is feminine, is personified as having been with God at the beginning of creation. And so, is this a kind of a move in the direction towards, at least, does this do for Judaism what other cultures had when they had male and female gods? Okay. And guess what? For Christians, this becomes an inkling of what we think about as the Son of God. The triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit. One God forever. So Christians read this and said, that's the Christ, that's the Son.
It's a word.
Huh?
In the beginning, there is a word. Is that the same?
That logos. That's John's Gospel.
Yeah.
Okay, but here, right, so actually John's Gospel is on the other end of this passage, huh?
Right.
Because the point is, the wisdom teacher is talking about wisdom, but over the centuries, it got to be seen as a kind of a accompaniment to God, a feminine partner to God of a sort, and then early Christians, after they experienced the Christ, and Jesus is, I and the Father are one, and everything, no one knows the Father except the Son. That's Matthew's gospel. Christians began to read this text as a reference to Christ, the Son, who was with the Father at the beginning of creation. Now, Jews don't read it this way, of course, but you see, that became, have you ever heard the word Arius? Arius? Arius was the author of a famous heresy. This was his text, because he says, notice, because he lived in an age where Christians read this passage as speaking about Christ. But notice, he's not the same as the Father. He's the Father's helper. He's the first thing he created. See that? The Lord created me, verse 22. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work. That's what Arius was saying. Jesus, the Son of God, was God's creature, his angel, the first thing he made. So Arius used this text that Christians use to talk about the Christ against the church, or against. So again, we're going to leave it there, but just know that in the 4th century, when Christians were debating about, is Jesus truly divine, or was he just God's little helper, this passage got drawn in. Let's pray and go to lunch. We'll come back after lunch and do a little more lecture, because we got another chapter or two, and then we'll
That would be great if you
pray first. Pray, and then you
continue
ask your question.
about-
Okay? Father, Son, and